So, for those of you that have not joined an MPOWDER masterclass before, this is probably the favourite part of what I get to do as host of this gorgeous and growing global community. We have been creating these events for over 5 years now in the UK. And as our community has grown largely by word of mouth and working with some amazing doctors and practitioners also in the US, we're now seeing more and more people join us every month, which I adore. Please remember that this evening is a conversation with a phenomenal expert, but it's not personalised advice. We're not able to ask Dr. Kat medically orientated questions relating to our own health. She can talk in general terms. All of our experts are always incredibly helpful, but that's our way of protecting them and also you. So without further ado, Dr. Kat, welcome back to the MPOWDER family.
Hello. Thanks for inviting me back.
So I'm going to give people who have not met you a little bit of an overview of your CV, which I've had to boil down because it's so extensive and amazing. But what I love about your work is this blended approach you take. You are obviously a sleep expert, but you've also done a huge amount of work within the psychotherapy sphere. And what I love is the way that you look at sleep disturbances and insomnia through these three interconnecting spheres. You talk about that biological lens, the social lens, and obviously the psychological patterns that many of us find ourselves in as well. And one of the things that you reflected on to me before this evening is the point that while the sleep problems we're going to be talking about this evening, we're all here because we're going through a life stage. We're in perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. And hormones obviously have a huge part to play, but your reflections are often on the fact that the biological changes are actually only part of the story. And life at this stage, with all of its stresses and pressures, and perhaps more importantly, some of the psychological and relational changes that happen during midlife can have a really big impact on our sleep as well. I'm really looking forward to enabling that conversation to happen a little bit this evening. And then you talk also about the way that we relate as females to the changes that happen at this stage of life as well, and how that impacts on sleep and can make it harder for us to just settle, for that mind to calm. And I can see many of the questions we've had preemptively about this evening are about that swirliness of the mind and the brain across the evening into the night, the 1 a.m., the 2 a.m., the 3 a.m. wakes. I think it's going to be really interesting to dig into that too. And then your philosophy in terms of the role of therapy, that opportunity to explore all of it holistically, not just to enable sleep to come, but also to enable us to understand ourselves better, which is what MPOWDER as a community is all about. So thank you for all of that. And I want to kick into this evening really with a bit of a step back. We're obviously going to be talking about sleep and how we can find a way back to rest. But can you start at the beginning? I often feel that sleep's treated as this passive state and we switch off at the end of the day and it should come immediately. But neuroscience is increasingly telling us that sleep is, well, one, it's a really active and restorative process for our body. So it's very important. But also, it's not as simple as that. Can you begin by telling us why we sleep and why it's so important for us in midlife? Yeah, as a start point, just to lay the foundations for this conversation.
So why we sleep, right? I can't give you a definite answer because we simply do not know. We do not know if there's one single reason as to why we sleep, but we do know why it is so immensely important. And it is so immensely important because it's the foundation for your health and well-being, for your physical health, for your emotional well-being, for your mental and cognitive well-being, right? And for me, it's really the foundation of a house. That's what sleep is, and everything else builds on top. And it's a bit similar, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? That pyramid with self-actualization at the top. The bottom layer, the basic layer, and basic here means fundamental, that is your physiological needs, and sleep's right in there. So without sleep, your physical health will suffer, your cardiovascular system will suffer, and it presents a little bit different also between the sexes, men and women. So for women, the cardiovascular system is more impacted upon than men, for example. But then there's also your mood that's impacted, and we know that women, there's a higher proportion compared to men for depression and anxiety. Right. And for me, poor sleep or insomnia, anxiety, depression, they hang out around the same street corner.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways, as in depression can lead to poor sleep, or poor sleep can contribute to depression. And then final thing is the cognitive, it's the performance, the ability to talk here, to have a conversation, a coherent conversation, to think through the problem that we are facing, to pick a strategy that is tailored to the problem rather than one off the shelf that I've always taken, which is what happens if we are tired. We don't come up with novel solutions to novel problems. We pick what we've done before. So in a nutshell, why sleep is so important, or rather, what I should say, why it is so important, given all these points that I just made, is so that we can live a healthy, a good life, not isolated, but actually in connection to others, because all of that, being in good physical and mental health, enables us to interact with the people around us and have functioning, nurturing relationships.
It's so interesting, actually. It makes me reflect on the research we did as a community at the end of last year, which was all around connection. And obviously, we are a community because we recognize the
Mm.
significance of making connections. And quite often, it's connections like this, where we're all in our little spaces in the evening where we feel actually safe. We're all on part of the same journey. Those are often the ones that I think we undervalue, actually. It's like when we went into the pandemic and we forgot how valuable it was having that conversation with the post person or picking up your milk from the local store, those kind of little interconnections. But I think what we saw in that research was that females in midlife really recognize the importance of connectivity, of friendship, and yet many of the symptoms that we get outside of the ones you just described make us retreat. So we both understand how important it is, but we find it so hard sometimes to be out in the world, because when the joy goes, when you don't feel like yourself, when you don't feel like you've got anything to say, it is those interactions that we just gently step away from as females, which is a worry for our health. So it's really interesting that sleep also plays such a fundamental part in that ability to connect, as you say.
Yeah. And its
Um,
benefits, just on that, sleep research has shown, and again, comparing the sexes, particularly for women, having emotional social support has a beneficial effect on sleep, right? So
Mm.
we really need it for many, many reasons, that connection, that sense of being connected, and it supports our sleep. And then sleeping well will enable us to be motivated to go and seek connections. Or
Yes,
flip it around, research has shown if I feel sleepy, I tend to withdraw from other people. So that sense then of isolation, loneliness can build up. So really, it's a vicious cycle, and wherever it starts, but once you're in that cycle, it feeds itself.
really interesting. So talk to me a little bit about the science of circadian rhythms, because linked to that, I often feel like we assume that if we're not sleeping very well, something is wrong with our ability to sleep. But you focus a lot on internal timing as well as mindset, which we'll talk about in a minute. But can you explain to us what circadian rhythm actually is, and also how we understand the body to have this central clock in the brain? And then what I know I've learned from you over the last few years is there's little clocks across the body that need to stay in sync as well.
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to think of the circadian system and the circadian clock, as in the master clock, like you said, that's here in the brain, is the analogy of an orchestra. The conductor is your clock up here that sets the timing, the beat,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then there are lots of little clocks in all the different organs, and almost every cell has its own clock that will tick. But like an orchestra, in order to play a beautiful piece of music, yeah, all the musicians to play a piece of music, you need someone that sets the beat and that
Mm-hmm.
tells which group of instruments is playing and which is quiet, and then they come back in, and so on and so forth. Without that one person, people will not be in tune with one another, or not for long. And it's exactly the same in the body. Each cell has its clock, and that clock ticks, but it needs a master clock to know what's the overall time, and also when to do something and when not to do something. Because our clock, and in the way all the cells in the body, they're inside, they're in the dark. They don't know when it's light or dark, day or night, right? So they need the clock to tell them now it's daytime and do whatever needs to be done during the daytime, and now it's nighttime and now do whatever needs to be done during the nighttime. And the way the clock knows this is through your eyes. There's a special photoreceptor in your eyes, not for vision, simply for light detection and darkness detection, because darkness is also a piece of information. So in the morning, when you open your eyes, light gets in, gets to the clock, clock goes, okay, body, it's daytime. And then when you close your eyes, when it gets dark, that message again is passed on to the clock. And the clock goes, okay, now it's dark, now it's nighttime, body. And that's when melatonin is released. And melatonin really is a signaling molecule that it's nighttime. It's less about sending you to sleep. It has a bit of a sleepiness effect, but it mainly tells the rest of the body, now is nighttime, do what's needed for the nighttime.
Amazing. That's so interesting. I just get blown away by how amazing our biology is. And obviously, we're going to come on to talk about disruption, but I imagine we talk a lot in a sort of oversimplistic way about sleep hygiene and blue light and these things, but that understanding of what's actually happening in terms of our eyes and these amazing parts of our body that are designed to basically ensure that we stay in sync is fascinating. So, I want to talk to you a little bit about the toolkit for midlife because to that point around the hygiene list that many of us will have exhausted in terms of the top 10 for sleep, we know that 60% of us are likely to struggle with sleep in midlife. And I know it's about more than our hormones, as we said in the introduction, but can you talk to us a little bit about what happens at this stage in life? Because again, I think understanding biochemically what's happening on the inside can help us because it's such a frustration for many of us. The thing I hear the most in our community is I always slept well. It's the one thing I never had an issue with, and now I can't sleep. So can you talk to us about what impact the hormone
Yeah.
transition has?
Yeah, and just on that point, this I've never had a sleep problem before. I could
Mm,
just go and trust. I never thought about my sleep. I hear that so often from clients, and it's almost worse compared to someone who has had poor sleep, well, all their life or occasionally.
yeah.
There's the sort of, I know this, but if this sudden change from being a good sleeper and then suddenly there's this struggle, there's this, we can leave you
Mm,
baffled. It's like,
mm,
what just happened that I can't do that anymore? And that can also then feel your body is fallen or alienated or has turned against you.
yes.
And
Yeah.
that sense of my body has turned against me, that brings conflict and anger, but also a deep sense of anxiety and insecurity. So to get to your actual question about what's
Mm,
happening, it is so important to have an understanding what's happening. And even if sometimes we can't change all of it,
mm,
but knowing, hey, this is what is happening, and it's not just happening to me, like you said, it's 60%, if not more, who are women who are experiencing poor sleep during the perimenopausal journey. That again gives that sense of social support, right? Even if I don't
mm,
know that person, but I know here in this community, for example, there are others who are struggling with the very same thing. I'm not the only one. So immediately I'm
mm,
connected, even if I sit here in front of my computer in my four walls. So that
mm,
bit, you
mm.
asked what's happening. So one big change is the fluctuating hormones. So it's different signals reaching the brain. And we talked about, for example, the circadian clock is in here. And
Yeah.
generally the sleep center that regulates our sleep are in the brain. And the sleep centers, the circadian clocks, they all have receptors for ovarian hormones. Okay? So they rely on a regular message from the estrogen and progesterone. Now, when those levels start to fluctuate, the signals reaching the brain, the sleep centers, the circadian clock, they will be confusing. They may not be as strong, they may not be as
Mm,
clear, they may be too much. And so sleep center, circadian clock, they get a bit confused. Well, what should I be doing here? Right?
mm,
What should I be promoting right now in this moment? So that's one way. Then there's normal aging, dare I say. Normal aging
mm,
means there are changes to the biological clock. There are changes
mm,
to the melatonin that I mentioned a moment ago that's secreted at nighttime, telling the body it's nighttime. The levels start to decrease. That's just how it is. So that
right.
could be another reason why we see sleep problems, particularly the fragmented sleep. Fragmented means waking up during the night and then it takes you some time, again, varies between people, to fall back asleep. So that is happening. Then there's just things like pain or other comorbidities, physical ailments that can play a role. And then there's this part of how I relate to all of these changes. Do I get fearful? Do I get angry? Do I get depressed about them? And then that will again have an impact on the body and on my hormonal balance as well.
Mm, mm,
Or do I say, and it's not easy, I know I say it so easily, but it's certainly not easy, is to say, yeah, and this is how it is right now. This is my body changing during this period. It's not how I want it to be, and it is really scary, but that's what my body is doing, like so many other female bodies.
mm. And we're going to come on to talk about that. And I think it's fascinating, actually. As you were talking, a number of things floated into my head from previous conversations we've had with experts. And we had the wonderful Dr. Shadle talk to us in October for National Menopause Month about insomnia. She talked a lot as well about that mindset piece. And you've said this to me before. We do phenomenal things as women. We can raise countries, we can carry small planets on our backs. And the fear that I think often sets in with sleep is around that inability to cope the next day. And yet we've all, by the time we've reached this point in our lives, done so much that really that it's almost like a disproportionate fear of what a night without sleep will mean that can be so damaging to our ability to actually find rest.
Absolutely. And so often when clients share that these are the worries, the fears that go through my mind at night, and then I don't know, the story continues, says, so what, and then what happened during the day about these fears? Well, I just went and did it. There's no second thought. The stuff gets done, exactly. The country gets raised. But it's almost like not noticed. But in the middle of the night, there's that fear, I won't be able to do that. It's so big. Yeah.
So let's talk about that in a little bit more detail, because I wanted to talk to you about why trying harder to sleep actually makes it harder to sleep. And everyone in our community, they're super smart females, and they've read the books, they followed the protocols, we've got the wearables, we're optimizing everything, and yet sleep still doesn't work. And you said to me right up to this evening when I was preparing and interviewing you, you said, sleep isn't something you can control or biohack your way into. So I wanted to talk about that, because explain to me what that means and why, for so many of us, the more we try and fix sleep, the harder it becomes.
So sleep is a biological process. It's a natural process in the same way that wake is a natural process, right? It's a sleep-wake cycle, like night, light and dark form a cycle. We sleep-wake form a cycle. It will naturally happen. It needs the non-doing, right? That calming, that stepping back, that letting go, or rather, I think letting be. Letting go for me is still an action, but the letting be is simply, I let my hands rest. And with that comes the calmness, and then sleep can come. Whereas if I try to control, if I do, like you said, I read all the books, doing all the things, sleep hygiene rules is probably the worst term ever. I apply a lot of pressure, but also I put a lot of effort and attention on something. I'm waiting. When is it going to come? I've had no coffee and I've been for my 30-minute run and I'm eating healthily. I've done everything that's in the book. So come on, sleep, waiting, waiting, waiting. And it's almost like we're trying to pull it closer and closer and closer. But my main thing is that the attention is on something. I'm waiting. And when I'm waiting, all of us will know from the night before Christmas, waiting for sunset to come, right? How well did we sleep the night before? Because we are waiting. And if I'm waiting, I'm alert to know when it finally has arrived. But that all creates a tension, that creates an alertness in the mind, but also in the body, because mind, body, it's one, right? So that embodiment of the thinking, that will release adrenaline, cortisol, not in masses, but enough to create or maintain an arousal. That's there. And the other part is why we want to sleep. And that's what you mentioned a moment ago, right? If I don't sleep, I fear I won't be able to do all the things that matter to me. So there is a danger. And when the body mind has a sense of I'm in danger, not sleeping endangers me because I won't be able to do what I need to do, the last thing the body will let us do is fall asleep.
That makes absolute sense.
When I'm asleep, that's when the lion can strike.
So interesting. And that brings me into the next question for this evening. If we can't force sleep, then to your point about letting it be rather than letting it go, how do you create a condition where sleep or rest even is something that we can achieve? What does that shift look like in practice? When you look at that shift in practice and how you help females who come in to see you in clinic, what is the shift and what are the tools and the protocols or the mindset that we need to think about more?
Yeah. So I think one thing is about ability, the word you mentioned early on. We all have the ability. You don't just suddenly lose the ability or the skill to sleep, because again, sleep is a natural biological process. It's not an ability. Your body can sleep. It doesn't need any training in that. Well, babies to some degree, but that's again because of how we live. It's more around a capacity, as in creating the environment that is sleep friendly. And that is very much, yes, in the evening, as in the place where I go to sleep, and perhaps what I do in the hour before. But it's not just that, right? It's actually the entire day. It starts the moment I wake up. That's when I create the environment for sleep, because the environment for sleep is the physical space and is the mental, the emotional space up here in the entire body, right? It's about getting it right in your
Mm.
mind, in your body, as well as in your surroundings.
I remember this beautiful phrase that we've used a lot in the community, I think, as a result of some of the conversations with you, but that sense of a good night's sleep starts in the morning. How do you encourage us to build our rhythms a different way that enables our body to be ready
Mm.
to sleep?
Yeah, good question. It's a bit like, what's the word? A wish list, right? I'm fully aware
Mm,
what I'm going to say. A lot of people will think, oh, but I can't do that. And that's because of how society is structured. But you mentioned the word rhythm. It is
mm,
finding out what is my rhythm. And it would start with ditching the alarm clock and waking up as and when your clock says, okay, and now it's wake up time, right? Now she's had enough sleep, right? That's how it would start. And we see that beautiful spectrum of very early people and very late people. Some people wake up very early. I fall in that category. My husband, he's more one of the late people. And there's no wrong or right. It's simply that's what your rhythm is. That's what your timing is. So that's how it ideally would start. The other thing about this alarm clock, most noises are not necessarily the most caring or softest
mm,
noises. So it
mm,
really jolts you out of that. And we know that when we wake up, cortisol is on the rise. So that can add another level of cortisol to the system. So getting up in that sense, ideally gently, and then light. We want light in the morning. Ideally, you would wake up in a not necessarily bright environment, but letting some light in tells your clock daytime is starting. Get everything ready. And then by all means, whether you want breakfast or not, that's really up to you. I'm not a nutritionist. I often say wait with coffee because your
mm,
alertness will naturally rise. No matter how you've slept, there is a rise in alertness. So you don't have to have coffee immediately. So you
mm,
can save that for a little bit later. And then the other part I would say is make sure you have some breaks during your day, because for a lot of us, you wake up with that alarm clock and immediately it's go, 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 whether that's getting ready for work, getting the kids ready, whatever it might be, but it's go, go, go until the end of the day, but like the Duracell bunny, that's running, running,
mhm,
running, and
mhm,
then suddenly the battery's empty and falls over, is making sure you have little breaks. It's important for your energy levels, but also it teaches your brain or your body that it's not just a continuous marathon run, it's rather little sprints, so that
mm,
downtime is normal.
mhm,
And then come back to taking you during the day, there is for all of us a little dip in our alertness. For some more, for others less, but we all have a dip in alertness. Great time to have a coffee, but then leave the caffeine from 2 or 3 p.m. Have no more because otherwise it can impact with your nighttime sleep. Make sure you get some exercise in. Again, where it fits, where it suits you. Personally, I would say don't get up extra early to fit the exercise in because it comes at a cost of your sleep time.
sleep.
And we
Yeah.
know sleep's important for your physical health. And then as you come to the evening, you have whatever you want as a meal. Having said that, Mediterranean diet or food items seem to be sleep supporting, let's call it that. So that can include complex carbohydrates, right? So that your blood sugar levels don't drop or not too low. What you eat matters as much as when you eat. So eating
Mm,
3 hours before you go to bed. So earlier
mm,
dinner is certainly better for your overall health. That's for your sleep. And then dim the light levels. It doesn't mean, at least for me, that you cannot look at your screen, that you cannot look at your phone, but dimming the overall light levels and being really mindful as to when you pick up your phone, as to why you're picking up your phone. Is it because you were bored? Is it to stop some rising anxiety? What's the reason for you to pick up your phone? And then making a choice rather than following a rule. Oh, I can't look at the screen after 8 p.m. because otherwise I'm breaking the sleep hygiene rules.
mm,
That will probably lead again to more pressure, right? Which is not helpful for sleep. So it's much more about noticing what are my urges, wants, desires, and then making a choice. Something that I often talk to clients about is time boxing, things like looking at your phone, so that it's, yep, I allow myself to do this and I give myself whatever, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, again, depends on the day. And then really this wind down that happens, but not as a pressure. It's more, again, this letting things be. It's just letting my hands settle and slowly stepping back from the day, from the busyness of the day. And because, and this is where it comes back to, because I've had little mini breaks during the day, it doesn't need to be many, you don't need to be long, but the body knows that this slowing down is possible, is allowed. And that then can also help with the sleep, with the letting go of the mind. Or
Amazing. I want to come back and just ask some questions, because the reality, as you highlighted, as you described the ideal day, is I feel like we in midlife, we're tired and wired, and life has never been busier. For many of us, it's a constant battle to get through the day. It sounds to me from what you're saying, if it's not possible for us to wake when we would naturally wake, there are ways of waking that are less jarring. And then that principle of light and consciously allowing light that can be helpful in terms of signaling to our body that it's time to get up and it's daytime. Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
one nice way of waking up is with the wake up lamp,
Yes.
that gently starts to rise, because when the eyes are closed, and you can all try this right now, as long as you've got light on, you will notice there's still light coming through the closed eyelid, right? So that information is still passed on to the clock.
Right.
So that is certainly something, and just nicer, calming sounds as well. All of these little things can help soften that waking up, that harshness. How we enter the day really matters.
And talk to me a little bit about these mini rests, because I know, again, having talked to you before, and one of the practitioners that we do quite a lot of work with describes this as radical rest, because it feels so naughty to stop in the day because we were trained not to. So what does rest look like? Is it literally just stopping what I'm doing and breathing? Do you have a ritualistic element to it? How do we optimize that, again, in a way that's practical when we're often running at 100 miles an hour?
It could be as simple as, imagine you sitting at your computer and typing a speech or a chapter or whatever it is, and it's the sitting back and yep, taking a breath in and a breath out, really important that it's breathing out, and just noticing where you are, what you are doing. It's less being in the content, it's more this noticing, okay, yeah, here I am sitting at my desk doing whatever I'm doing, and feeling your feet on the floor or wherever they might be in that moment, your hands, your arms, your back, what it's touching, your buttocks. And then you might decide to stand up, do a stretch, and really noticing the mindful stretching, as in the noticing of the movement and how it feels in the different parts of the body. And if you have time, maybe stepping away, going to make a cup of tea. And again, staying in the movement. So very quickly, what can happen is, yes, you go and make that cup of tea and your mind goes back to that email you're writing, right? Or the event you have going on in the evening, past, future, but it's not in the present moment. So really trying to keep bringing the mind back. The mind is likely to wander off, so just bring it back, bring it to the kettle, listening to the sound, smelling the tea as it's brewing. All of that, it doesn't take long. You can make it as long and short as you want. Like I said, the sitting and just feeling your feet on the floor, your body connecting to the chair can be 30 seconds. And then you re-engage. And it's that choice. Okay, and now I re-engage with that email I was writing. It's that's
Really
what it's
interesting.
doing.
I think what's really emerging for me in this conversation this evening as well is this, you described earlier, the body won't let you sleep if it feels like it's in danger. And I guess these little micro rests across the day, it's again reminding the body that it's safe and that rest comes. And as you say, it's not that marathon that we just have to keep going and then we hit the evening and we suddenly expect the body to understand that now it needs to stop running, although all the signals you've given it all day. And it's so interesting that all these modalities often bring us back to simple principles of just being rather than doing, that whole concept of being a human being and not a human doing, and being in the present, the impact that can have on our body psychologically, improving the way that our brain is feeling, but also by biochemically improving the way that we feel as well. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the cortisol. There's lots of research done on measuring cortisol in perimenopausal women and people generally, and it's not conclusive. But what it does look like is that cortisol is higher in the evening. And if it's
Mm.
something is higher, it has to come down. And if it's higher, it will take longer to come down if it's still somewhat elevated during the night. And the question for me is, where is that higher cortisol coming from? Yes, the hormonal changes, they can and will play a role. But we also know that stress increases in midlife
Mm.
as well for
Mm.
various different reasons. And
Mm.
stress impacts on the cortisol, impacts on the adrenaline. So if I can find ways in the daytime to lower the cortisol or not let it rise above the normal limits, whatever normal is, that may have a positive impact on the sleep at night.
Yeah, really helpful. Let's talk about that, because one of the key questions coming in, as you will not be surprised to know, is around that psychology of wakefulness at 3 o'clock in the morning. I feel like the whole of us, we should all just call each other. In fact, we should probably do a masterclass at 3 a.m. But that is the moment that I think for many of us is the most frustrating. And actually, I had a lovely question in asking, there's this kind of clarity that sometimes comes, I think, for some of us at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. For others, it's that worry worm where it's totally illogical and you're woken up in the middle of the night completely alert, often with a racing mind. Why does that happen? What's happening psychologically and also neurologically in that moment, and why does the brain do that just at the moment when it should be asleep?
Because the brain never stops thinking. The brain doesn't switch off. So the brain continues. You said earlier on we thought sleep is a passive state, but it's
Mm.
actually active. It's exactly that. Right now, my attention goes outwardly, but when I'm asleep, that attention is turned inwardly. The processes still happen, not exactly the same as in the daytime, right? But the recovery, the maintenance, all of that is work, right?
Mm.
So that's taking place. The sense making, the consolidation of memories, with taking the emotional sting out, the experience we've had during the day. That's what happens at night, particularly in the REM sleep. And so when we're sleeping, we go through the different sleep stages: light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep. And in these different stages, we have different neurotransmitters, different hormonal milieus up in the brain. All of that has an impact. Now, to come to your question about waking up at 3 and then suddenly the mind is racing and there's this worrying, but for some people, clarity, it's the question, what type of clarity? Is it really clarity in the sense of analytically I can think through a problem step by step by step and
Mm.
come up with a solution? For some people, really, they have that. But often what I find is that there's this associative thinking, combining
Mm.
different ideas, which it's arguable or said is what happens in dreams, for example, is pulling on different ideas, right? Or we know sleep generates insight. Again, it's that pulling on different ideas
Mm.
or different experiences. And then you wake up and it's like, oh, yeah, that's
Yes.
the solution to the problem, right?
Hmm.
But coming back to the 3 o'clock awakening, we've got different areas in the brain that do different things, and they are involved in our thinking and our emotions. Our prefrontal cortex, this part behind our forehead, that is really our executive center. That
Right.
regulates an awful lot. There's a lot of thinking that happens. Further in the back is the amygdala. The amygdala is involved in our emotions. And well-rested person, it's a bit like the prefrontal cortex. I compare it to the parent, and the amygdala is the child, and the parent regulates the child. When I'm sleep deprived, and that's exactly what I am at 3 a.m. in the morning, the parent is too tired, can't really do the regulation very well. And so the amygdala child is like the unruly child who's the naughty one running
Mm.
around, running the show. Now, the amygdala, there is a sort of bias towards negativity, hence the rumination and the worry
Ah.
that's there, right? That sort of balancing, regulating adult is not working very much because it's too tired. And so the worry, the anxiety can take over or shape, color more of our thinking and our feeling that's
That's
happening.
fascinating. I mean, we've had this conversation before, but from a different angle, that where again it was described to us as a community, this almost shutting off of the reason. But that's
Yeah,
such a helpful
yeah,
way to describe it. And actually, I'm just thinking about my own 3 a.m. wakes, almost thinking in terms of the parent and child and this unruly, so like almost looking at it with
yeah,
kindness, which obviously is what some of the sort of internal family system therapists would encourage us to do.
yeah,
And almost like
exactly.
name that as an unruly child, and with love understand that it's not going to be the most advanced in its thinking and recommendations for you at that time in the morning, is quite a lovely way to
Yeah.
think about what happens, and that's really fascinating.
Mm.
And you talked about a little bit about why that happens. I want to come on before we come to questions because time's racing, the psychology of changing habits and making them stick. So I think, again, what you've described to us in terms of an ideal pattern for the day where our good night's sleep starts when we wake is really useful for us to take away. And what I will do, just for people who've not been in a session with Dr. Kat before, she's given us a wonderful way to almost reset that circadian rhythm when we do have time. So if there are people here today who are on Easter holidays with their children, there's a little bit more flex, or you are planning a week away. I know, Dr. Kat, you've talked to the community before about when you have that time, that's sometimes a very useful way to almost encourage your body to go back to a form of natural rhythm, which I can share in show notes. But for the purpose of this evening, can you talk to us about helping us in terms of rethinking the way that we do our days? How do we make habits, and how do we change the way that we're functioning? Because so much of it, I feel, in midlife is reactive and more often driven by those that we feel that we need to prioritize before ourselves.
I think small changes, right? 1 minute more, one small step.
Mm,
That's really it. And implement that until that feels solid. And you might have to reiterate that, be that increasing your morning light exposure,
mm,
doing that slowly, as in you don't have to go for a half an hour walk.
mm,
Can you just open your blinds, or can you have your breakfast by the well-lit window? It's starting with the small things. I think that's the key, and doing one thing at a time. Then there's the question why you want to do that. What's driving it? I want to sleep well. Yes, but what does that mean when you sleep? What's possible then? What's the driver behind that? Because that will dictate how much these changes will become a pressure, how much these changes are driven by anxiety, right? When I'm anxiety, I'm tense again, or whether it is much more relaxed. And when I'm more relaxed, I'm focused on the outcome, but I'm less clinging to that outcome, right? So when I'm more relaxed, I'm calmer. And physiologically, again, that means cortisol, adrenaline are reduced. My parasympathetic nervous system will be the one that is active, which can support the sleep. So that's really, I think, what I would say there.
It's really interesting. And linked to that, we talked before the session this evening about the different camps we may fall into as women. You've got that tired but wired gang where they feel shattered across the day, and then at 10 o'clock we suddenly have this surge of energy and decide to do all the ironing. You have those of us who can't go to sleep the minute they put their head down but feel absolutely shattered as they go to bed. We've talked about that 3 a.m. wake, and then also people that might sleep fitfully but just wake up never feeling refreshed. Are there any tools or tips specifically for those groups that you would say, well, if I was going to do one small thing, to your point, this would be the thing I'd recommend? Or is it the same for all of us struggling with sleep in different ways?
Yeah, it's the unrefreshed sleep. If there's no known problem with falling asleep or
Hmm.
waking up during the night, I would say going and seeing a GP, getting a blood test done, just to see
Mm,
if there's anything else going on that could be causing that unrefreshedness. It could be perhaps an allergy. It could be
mm,
pain. It could be a thyroid issue. It's looking that medically, organically, there isn't anything else going on. And then I would look at what does my day look like?
mm,
Because, like I said before, in the daytime, my attention goes outward, right? And I'm taking in all this information, all these experiences. And if it comes and comes and comes and comes, where is the time to process them? Again, if I have my mini breaks, there's time to
mm,
process them. Somewhere in
mm,
the back of my mind, processing can happen. But if I constantly put stuff in and then go to bed, literally just fall into bed, I might be so tired that, yes, I sleep, that we call it sleep pressure, may be high enough to really push you into sleep. But nevertheless, the brain is processing all of that
mm,
stuff, right? And because I said the brain stays active, the thinking continues, maybe not there,
mm.
but there. And what we think about, what's happening in the brain, has an impact on our body. Okay?
Wow.
So we know that if you put people in a stress test during the day and you tell them the next day that we'll do another test and so on and so forth, you create sort of anticipatory stress that can have a negative impact on their sleep. They're sleeping, but physiologically you can see the stress markers, they're all
Wow.
still high. So that could be another reason as to why you have unrefreshing sleep. It's because there's too much coming in during the day, too little time in the day to process it. Processing happens at night, processing impacting the body, not giving
Mm.
you the restful sleep.
That's really interesting. And those of us that decide to do all the chores literally at the point that we should have been cleaning our teeth, is that the cortisol piece? What's happening there that makes us actually get energized at the very point we shouldn't? Or is that again a circadian rhythm piece potentially?
Depends really, I think, where your rhythm is.
Mm,
Many of us get a second wind in the
mm,
evening. We call it the forbidden zone for sleep. That does exist. And the belief is that if we look at animals, that it's as the day comes to an end, you need to get your nest ready, that everything is where it
mm.
should be, and crucially, that you're safe. And for that, you need energy, right? So it could be that second
Ah,
forbidden zone for sleep, get this ready, and then you can sleep. But there could also be psychological reasons. The sort of inner critic, inner manager, you haven't finished everything, you need to finish things. Particularly, again, if we keep doing, when and how do we register that something has been done? If it's
mm,
constantly
mm.
do, right? So maybe the evening comes and there's no sense of I've achieved something. So I then do the ironing because you can really see, okay, and now my ironing is done, as in I've achieved something. There could
Yes.
be another reason why that comes. And then that could increase the cortisol. Again, what we think about impacts how we feel in the body.
Really interesting. I want to come on to some of the questions before we do our final point. And as I said, we had a number in this evening, one of which we've covered off. We talked a little about the 3 a.m. One of the questions we had coming in actually was relating to pain. So being in pain, which you mentioned actually earlier in the conversation. What suggestions do you have? Because I think there's that thing where sometimes when we're on painkillers as well, we can get knocked out. But
Mm.
it's a really difficult one because you're turning. So when in the night, when you're naturally moving, pain comes and obviously that can pull you out of it, and then just also the fact that you wake up feeling completely unrefreshed. So any thoughts on managing pain and rest?
Pain and sleep, they
Mm,
don't go well together, and they can reinforce. The more pain I have, poorer my sleep. If I don't sleep poorly, one thing is it impacts my mood, it impacts my pain
mm,
perception. So that
threshold,
can
yeah,
then
yeah.
drive the pain. So again, you've got that vicious circle. I think again, seeing the GP, looking what can be done medically. You mentioned some of the painkillers,
Mm,
they can knock us out. And it's the same with the sleeping pills. They can knock you out, although I have lots of clients who say don't do thing. But those who say they do, many of them say, but I don't wake up feeling refreshed. It's
mm,
not natural sleep that you're getting. So the
mm,
recovery value that you gain from that isn't the same as from natural sleep. And so painkillers can be very similar. But if that's all looked at, and you just have the pain, like for example, chronic pain, I think acceptance commitment therapy, ACT, has been shown to be really helpful when it comes to pain management. And in a nutshell, it's very much about your relationship with the pain. And I use ACT for insomnia because there are similarities between the two. It's not under your control. So I can work on my relationship with that pain. Because in ACT, we often say there's clean discomfort and then there's dirty discomfort. Clean discomfort is the pain that you get when, I don't know, you stab yourself with a needle. And then
mm,
what your mind makes of that pain, that's another level. That's the dirty discomfort. And it's about learning to remove that extra level of pain and then working with your relationship with the original pain. And that can help. It doesn't make the pain go away, but it has been shown to improve how you relate to the pain. I don't want to say how bothered, because that's so flippant, but how much it probably holds you back.
mm,
And
mm,
how that all relates to sleep is the pain can wake you up, prevent you from falling asleep. But then what the mind adds to it, oh no, this pain is awful. And now it's stopping me from sleeping. And if I don't sleep, then my pain will be worse. And I won't be able to do X, Y, Z tomorrow. Oh, I
mm,
wish this would
mm,
all go away. That's that extra layer, right? That
mm,
brings
mm.
extra arousal in the system. Or can I say, yep, this pain, gonna breathe through it or breathe with it. It's not what I want, but it's here. What's the
Mm.
best position I can take right now? Not the one that makes the pain go away, but what's the best position in this moment that I can adopt?
That's really interesting. Thank you. And I will look to include some details for that around show notes for the individual that asked that question, because I think that's a really interesting area to explore. And then the final one, Dr. Cat, I know we've only got a few minutes left, is an interesting one because I think, again, it goes back to our perception of sleep. And the question was, how long does it take to recover from one sleepless night?
Very good question. Depends what happened in the night before and the night before the night before. So if you call it the sleep history,
Right.
that has an impact of, and just very quickly, so most of us, whenever I ask this question, how much sleep do you get on
Mm,
the nights and how much do you need to wake up feeling refreshed? There's a discrepancy of an hour. So certainly during the normal working week, most of us get less sleep than we need. So we build up a sleep debt. And if you then have a night where you don't sleep,
mm,
that's really hard compared to if you get the sleep you need on a nightly basis. And then there's one night where you don't, that will have a different impact or the
mm,
recovery
mm.
will be different. But anyway, how long, how long does it need to recover? It depends a little bit on the person, but I would say a couple of nights of extended sleep, meaning
Okay.
let's just say you normally get 7 hours. Maybe you can make it 8 hours, maybe you can make it 9 hours. And also, if you can, have naps. Because if you have a very long sleep suddenly, you will confuse your clock because your clock
Right.
will be pushing wake up time and then suddenly you keep it dark or whatever, you don't get up and the clock will be like, what's going on here? So rather than making it too long in one stretch, add an hour, hour and a half,
Hmm.
and see if you can do half an hour nap and do that for 2 nights or perhaps 3 nights. You don't have to pay back hour by hour what you've lost.
Right.
You
Okay.
don't have to do that. Hence, yeah, probably 2 nights, I'd say.
Wonderful. That's really helpful. And so my final question for you, it's one I love to ask, which is if there was one myth in your area, in your field of sleep that you would like to break and you wished every midlife female knew, what would it be?
Hmm. Whew, there's so many.
Yeah.
I think that you are the only one, as in the myth that you are the only one
Mm.
who cannot sleep. You said yourself, if we did a class at 3 a.m., a lot of people would show up. I had a client who would get up at night, open the curtains, lived in the city, just to see are there any other lights on? Is anyone else struggling like me? Right. So
Mm.
this sense of I'm the only one, because it leads to isolation, it increases the danger. That is really the myth. It is not so many of us, 60% at least, are experiencing poor sleep during the perimenopause, right? It, it is a feature of perimenopause. It's one of these symptoms, not the only one, but one of
Mm.
these symptoms. So you are not alone. You are not alone in your experience.
Dr. Cat, thank you. That's a beautiful way to end. And thank you to all of you that's joined tonight. I know that this week is a very busy one, busier probably than many. I'm so pleased that so many of you made it this evening because I think talking and hearing Dr. Cat live is always the best way to do it. I love knowing where you are and I love seeing your names pop up. So thank you for being here. And Dr. Cat, thank you for making the evening such a special one. Have a lovely night, everyone. Thank you.